Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Usually I try to do a video form of these reviews of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network, but I wanted to try something a little different, just audio this time around. With the video, it takes time to edit it and upload it and all this other kind of stuff and render it. So I wanted to try this out a little bit and see if this kind of takes a little less time. That takes a long time to do, and especially with 3 videos a week in terms of the WrestleRant videos. So I'm going to try to do an audio form for this one. Let me know what you guys think, either in the comments on Twitter, Facebook, at WrestleRant, Graham, Jason Matthews. Always appreciated. So today we're talking about the 2007 installment of the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view. If you want to check out my reviews of the 06 and 05 installments, they're already up on the channel. The final WrestleRant video of 2014. Hope you guys enjoy it. But kicking off this show is for the Intercontinental Championship, a steel cage matchup pitting the then champion Jeff Hardy against Johnny Nitro. Now, these two were involved in a pretty lengthy feud in the latter half of 2006 when Jeff Hardy returned from his 3-year hiatus from the WWE, engaging in a rivalry with the Intercontinental Champion Johnny Nitro. Trading the title back and forth, Jeff Hardy would win back that championship on an episode of Raw for the final time in November, before going on to continuing to feud with Nitro as well as Joey Mercury. A part of Eminem and the Hardy Boys would reunite. I talked about that pay-per-view as well in the December pay-per-view, the infamous event, right here on the channel if you want to go back and check it out. But these two were involved in a on and off feud in the latter half of 06, going on to the first pay-per-view of 2007. It would continue past this point as well. But Hardy and Nitro always had great matches. Jeff Hardy, when I watched his documentary, the My Life, My Rules documentary that was released in, I think, 2009, spoke very fondly of Nitro, a.k.a. John Morrison, who would later become known as John Morrison. Spoke very fondly of his matches with Morrison. I always thought these guys worked very well together, a great example of that. Thrived in the steel cage match environment. Johnny Nitro showed why he was a star, and much more than just a tag team competitor. Melina, who is the real-life fiance of Johnny Nitro, John Morrison in real life, was great at ringside, very annoying, which is exactly what a heel manager should be. More often than not, jumping the shark or anything like Michael Cole did a couple of years ago. But Melina, as the female manager for Johnny Nitro, was great in her role. Those two had great chemistry together. So an excellent match to kick off the show between Jeff Hardy and Johnny Nitro. Jeff Hardy would come out victorious, still the Intercontinental Champion, after Hardy was going to escape through the cage. Melina was distracting the referee, so it made the referee look incompetent to be distracted by Melina and can't open up the cage door. That seemed a bit silly, but Jeff Hardy couldn't get out the cage door. Because of that, Johnny Nitro tried to ascend the cage and climb over while this was all happening, and as he was doing so, Jeff Hardy drop-kicked the steel cage door, and it landed right in between Nitro's legs as he was coming down, so a great spot that I think was recently replicated in a steel cage match, I think with Ziggler and maybe Kane, I think if I remember correctly, a couple of months ago. But that was an awesome spot. Hardy emerged victorious, still the Intercontinental Champion. Up next, a tag team turmoil matchup to determine a future world tag team titles contenders. The teams included Crime Time, the Highlanders, the world's greatest tag team, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas, Jim Duggan and Super Crazy, and Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch. Now, I'm a fan of the tag team turmoil matches when they actually mean something. We got one on Raw just recently. Wasn't a huge fan of it. Sometimes it can be a bit formulaic. I really enjoyed this one. I thought the world's greatest tag team was great, both in their first incarnation over on SmackDown back in 03-04, as well as this incarnation in 2007. Benjamin and Haas, neither guy was doing anything at the time, so they might as well put them back together as a tandem, and they really worked well together in that environment. But, they had a great showing here. They knocked off the first 2 tag teams. They knocked off Jim Duggan and Super Crazy. They knocked off the Highlanders. They would get eliminated by Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, and then Crime Time would come in the 5th and final spot, pick up the victory, and became the new number 1 contenders to the tag team titles. The match itself, early on, it really wasn't anything too great. There were some instances like when the world's greatest tag team was in the ring with Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch. The live crowd didn't really have anyone to cheer for, so they just kind of sat on their hands. Same thing with the Highlanders, who I believe were heels. I can't remember exactly. Those guys weren't in WWE for very long. But still, though, pretty good matchup, went about almost 20 minutes. And it's just so funny to think that there was more tag teams in this matchup than there are in the entire WWE as a whole right now. This is only the Raw brand, too. This is back in 07. This is only 6, 7, 8 years ago. So it's just crazy to think how much the tag team scene has changed in that time. And people were complaining back then about these tag teams not meaning anything and stuff like that. And then you get, all these years later, we have barely any tag teams. Like currently we have Miz and Mizdow. It's more of like a stunt double and the actor and Miz. But I mean, it's a great tag team. It's something. The Usos, Los Matadores, and that's pretty much it. Golden Stardust, and there really aren't many teams beyond that, aside from the New Day and all the other tag teams out there right now. But still, though, I mean, it was just kind of sad to watch this matchup and think back on the current tag team division as compared to when it was back here. Crime Time at the time, who had just debuted in late 2006, was so over here. They were very happy, the live crowd that was, to see Crime Time go over and be named the new number one contenders to the tag team titles. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they ever ended up getting that tag team title championship matchup that they rightfully deserved after they earned it in this contest. I don't think they ended up getting that championship matchup because it was shortly thereafter the whole DX thing and Triple H got hurt, so Rated RKO were still tag team champions. That would have been a great match to do. Crime Time versus Rated RKO for the World Tag Team titles. Crime Time, of course, did not need to win, but they should have won a tag team title at some point in their 3 or 4 year run in WWE. I'm so surprised they never ended up getting a run with the WWE tag team titles or the World Tag Team titles, whatever. Still, though, I was surprised they never ended up doing that matchup between Crime Time and Rated RKO. Because like I said before, DX ended up getting hurt, Crime Time was just kind of out of the scene, and then Cena and Michaels would tag team together and win those tag team championships together a couple of weeks after this event. So kind of a small logic gap in that. But aside from that, good match though. Up next, we had Kenny Dykstra versus Ric Flair. The whole story here was that Kenny Dykstra was coming out of the Spirit Squad, I think only a few months removed. I can't remember the exact month that the Spirit Squad was sent to quote-unquote OVW as packaged up by DX. I can't remember when that was. It might have been in October or November. I know it was after they lost the World Tag Team titles to Ric Flair and Rowdy Roddy Piper. It might have been in October. I can't remember exactly. Still, though, a decent matchup. People just didn't really have any incentive to care about Kenny Dykstra at this point in time. And I'm not really sure why. I posed this question on Twitter when I was watching this pay-per-view a few days ago. And Kenny Dykstra, to me, dating back to 2010, 2011, because in the time that I've been a fan, April of 2008, he wasn't really on WWE TV much from that period in time. His tenure as a singles competitor was very short-lived. He was on the... What pay-per-view was it? I mean, he and Spirit Squad completely owned the year of 2006. And then when that kind of disbanded, Dykstra broke out on his own. I'll get to that in a second. His match with Ric Flair on the show, and he was pushed very briefly in the first half of 2007. Drafted to SmackDown and didn't do anything aside from feud with Chuck Palumbo, I think it was. Didn't do anything over on SmackDown. Disappeared for a long time. Resurfaced in the summer of 2008. Wrestled a few matches against Jesse and Festus over on the SmackDown brand, and then was later released in November of 2008, so he never really got his rightful due, in my opinion. I always saw Kenny Dykstra, and maybe this is just one person's opinion of it, but I always thought Kenny Dykstra could have fit that role that The Miz ended up getting. He had that look about him that you just wanted to punch him in the face. You thought he was an absolute douche. He was a great heel. In listening to his promo before this matchup that he cut on Ric Flair, not the greatest guy on the mic, but they could have easily given it a manager if that was the case. I thought he had a good look. He was very, very young, so they really had a future with him. I know he was going around for a while calling himself the future WWE Hall of Famer, all this other stuff, so obviously, if they were going to write that into the material for this guy as a thing to kind of latch onto, you would think they would have big plans for him. But they never really did much with him beyond this feud with Ric Flair. Like, this was a good matchup. I was happy to see him go over here. I mean, it doesn't really matter now because, like 8 years removed from this pay-per-view, but it was nice to see Ric Flair give Kenny Dykstra the rub. 3 matches in a row. Not often do you see that nowadays, especially with the caliber of Ric Flair, the legend that is, the Nature Boy. But, still, though, Kenny Dykstra was a guy that, I don't know, to me, I felt like they never really utilized him to his full potential. Like I said before, he wasn't too great in the ring. And when I posed this question on Twitter, a lot of people had varying opinions on Dykstra. And I thought Dykstra could have been more. Maybe it was his mic skills that kind of held him back a little bit. Maybe it was his lackluster in-ring skills. I always thought he was pretty good. I didn't really have a problem with him. I thought he was very, very good. And I thought they could have done more with him in his time with WWE. Because like I said, after this feud, he basically went nowhere. I don't even know if he was on WrestleMania 23 that year. And like I said, he went over to SmackDown, did nothing, got released. So I thought they really misused Kenny Dystra as a singles guy, and it would end up being Nikki, aka Dolph Ziggler, who would get the big push out of all the members of Spirit Squad. All have since been released from OVW, WWE, whatever. So up next, we had Mickie James versus Victoria for the WWE Women's title. Only about a 7-minute match. I thought it was pretty good. Victoria, the storyline going into this matchup was that she was slowly crossing each diva off her list of divas to knock off in order to get a shot at the Women's Championship on this pay-per-view. She took out Candice Michelle, she took out Maria, she took out Mickie James on one occasion to set up this championship matchup. That was a non-title matchup. This is a title match. So pretty good matchup for Mickie James and Victoria. We would see a lot more from them over in TNA a couple of years later. I think in 2010 or 2011, one of those years. They worked a lot together over in TNA. And they had a pretty good matchup here. I didn't really think it was too great. I thought it paled in comparison to the other matches that we saw from Trish and Lita, as well as Trish and Mickie at the 05 and 06 installments of this pay-per-view. But nevertheless, Mickie James would come out victorious. Still your women's champion, or still the women's champion, after interference from Candice Michelle and Maria at ringside, getting their revenge for being attacked by Victoria a couple of weeks prior. Up next for the World Tag Team Championships, Rated RKO defending against D-Generation X. This was a crazy match, and this was a pretty lengthy feud from the end of 2006, branching over, of course, into 2007 on this show. There was a lot of cool spots, and you got to give Triple H credit where credit is due. The guy, I think he not tore his quad, he tore something, his knee, or he tore something in this matchup. It had something to do with his leg. I should have looked this up before this, but I completely forgot what it was. But yeah, in hitting a spine buster, and it was during the finishing sequence too. It was kind of a terrible time for it to happen. But he's hitting a spine buster, and I think it was Randy Orton, and it was his left knee. And he worked through the entire rest of the matchup. I was super freaking impressed. And he was obviously just going through the motions at that point. Orton hit a RKO on him at one point, and Triple H, with his knee busted up so badly, could barely take it. It did not look good, but like I said before, you got to give the guy some fucking credit for going through this matchup injured with a terrible injury that would keep him out of action for, I think, upwards of 7 months or something like that. It was nuts. But still, though, you got to give him a tremendous effort. That aside, though, this was a great match. Lots of blood for those of you that like that kind of thing. A lot of hard-hitting action between the two rival tag teams. So I think everyone was bleeding at one point and another. I don't know if Triple H was bleeding at any point, but I know Shawn Michaels was. He was busted open with the World Tag Team title belt. Randy Orton was a fucking bloodbath in the middle of the ring. Edge was busted open. Shawn Michaels did a flying elbow through the table at ringside. Triple H did a pedigree while injured to Edge at ringside on top of one of the commentating tables. It was absolutely insane. So, great match here. Went to a no contest after Shawn Michaels attacked the referee. So, obviously, this was more about getting the revenge on Rated RKO than it was about winning the World Tag Team titles. And DX would eventually win their first World Tag Team titles together, not for another nearly 3 years in December of 2009. So, great match here. Really, really enjoyed it. Now, I don't think it went to a no contest because of Triple H's injury, because like we've seen in the years past, even if someone is injured, usually, especially if a championship is on the line, they will continue with the result of the match, but they're not going to change the title just because someone got injured, or not change it because someone got injured. Whatever. So I think if DX was supposed to win here, they would have won. They would have found a way to work around Triple H's injury, and they would have given DX the World Tag Team titles. But still, though, really, really enjoyed the matchup, and the finish at the end too. They wouldn't have made that up on the spot with DX taking out Rated RKO on the commentating tables. That wasn't ad lib. That was probably already worked into the matchup. But still, though, really entertaining matchup. Loved it. Up next, brief filler matchup, Chris Masters versus Carlito with Torrie Wilson in Carlito's corner. This feud kind of developed after Carlito came to the aid of Torrie Wilson, after Chris Masters locked her in the Master Lock, something that you would never see today. That's only scratching the surface as far as what we got on WWE TV when it came to the women around this period in time, and especially during the Attitude Era. But a fine matchup. They mentioned that they were former tag team partners. They talked about how they were contending for the World Tag Team titles together at one point in early 2006. I'm not going to say I was disappointed. I don't expect them to mention this kind of stuff, but it would be cool if they made note of how Masters and Carlito were kind of working in cahoots with each other at the 2006 installment, or was it 2006? Yeah, it was 06 installment of the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view in the Elimination Chamber match for the WWE title, and they worked together, and Carlito turned on Masters, and Carlito ended up going babyface and everything else. So it would have been nice if they mentioned that. I mean, aside from that, though, it was kind of a decent matchup, just designed to kill some time before the main event and in the tag team title match. So it served its purpose in that sense. Chris Masters went over after rolling up Carlito and holding the tight. So was what it was. We get to the main event for the WWE Championship. John Cena defending the gold against the undefeated Umaga. Now, I talked about this at length, I think it was, in my latest Push the Punish article on Bleacher Report, if you want to go back and check it out, with Umaga never really being utilized to his full potential. And then I thought this match with John Cena was kind of the end of his push, so to speak. I think they could have done a lot more with him at this pay-per-view and past this point, because I think, like they talked about in the article, you can go back and check it out for yourself, and that I don't know if it was, obviously not from the get-go, it was the sole purpose of building up Umaga just to be fed to John Cena. John Cena, by this point in time, after being on top for 2 years, did not need to be the one to put an end to the undefeated streak of Umaga. It kind of went out with a whimper. It was a really good matchup. Umaga was made to look strong in defeat, and they would end up having a great rematch, a very bloody and brutal rematch. Last Man Standing rules at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view a couple of weeks later, which I'll hopefully review here on the channel at some point in January. But great showing from Umaga in defeat. But did Cena really need to be the one to put an end to Umaga's winning streak? I mean, this is not the first time. He would also put an end to the undefeated streak of the Great Khali, and being unpinned anyway. Great Khali had already suffered a few losses before that. And I'm hoping that this has not happened with Rusev. Rusev is in a very similar situation right now, having been undefeated since the night after WrestleMania, has gone through everyone on the roster, a lot of big wins over Mark Henry, Big Show, Sheamus is the current United States champion, is set to feud with Ryback, and if he can defeat Ryback, he's headed to WrestleMania to likely face John Cena. That's what's been the rumor for a while now, so I'm hoping that's not the case, but to kind of digress from that, really enjoyed the matchup here. Like I said before, Umaga had a strong showing, was not a fan of how the undefeated streak was snapped so early. There was a lot more to do with Umaga. And even after they broke the undefeated streak, it was not the death of the character of Umaga. The character could have lived on past that point. It was more so the fact that after they broke the undefeated streak, and they did utilize him in a pretty meaningful manner when he was feuding with Bobby Lashley and over the ECW Championship and Donald Trump. Like, that's a big position to be in for Umaga, and he was in a very money-making matchup. I'm sure he made a big paycheck off the matchup at WrestleMania 23, one of the highest-grossing WrestleManias of all time. And specifically because of the match that he was involved in with Bobby Lashley and Donald Trump and Mr. McMahon. Huge rating seller. Huge, buy rate seller right there for WrestleMania 23. But after that fizzled out, they never really did anything with Umaga on Monday Night Raw. They brought him over to SmackDown, and like I said before, I talked about this all in Push the Punish. I don't want to go in too big of a rant here, but after this matchup, they never really did much of note with him, aside from the Bobby Lashley and Donald Trump stuff. They really just kind of killed off the character, and all the momentum that he had gotten up to that point was pretty much gone to waste. And he was a great athlete, too. It wasn't like he was a great Khali. I kind of made that comparison to before. But Umaga was nothing like the great Khali. He was a big dude, obviously, but he was very, very talented for a guy of his size, could absolutely fly. Maybe it was the Samoan in his blood and being related to guys like the Usos and Rikishi and all those kind of people, of course. They're all one big happy family. But maybe it just kind of runs in the family. I'm not really sure. But Umaga, for a guy of his size, was extremely athletic, extremely impressive, and they could have done a lot more with him in his time with WWE. And like I said before, enjoyed the matchup. They made Umaga look good. And, Cena got the win out of nowhere. He rolled up Umaga. It wasn't like a clean 1-2-3. They would set the stage for the rematch a couple of weeks later at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. But I was just simply not a fan of how Umaga's undefeated streak came to an end in the fashion that it did. It was booked well, but John Cena was not the one. He should not have been the one to finally defeat Umaga. That could have come at a much later time or even an earlier time, but to someone different. It didn't matter who it was. Maybe not like a DX member like a Triple H or a Shawn Michaels. I'm trying to think of someone on the roster at this period in time that could have used the win. Maybe a rising babyface in Carlito. I'm not really sure. But someone of that caliber could have used the win much more than John Cena did. So that closed off the pay-per-view. Kind of a not depressing way, but kind of a disappointing way to go off the show. I thought it was a great main event, though. They just could have done a lot more with that. The finish with John Cena going over, just kind of, it was so predictable, and a lot of people just didn't want to see it happen. But enjoy the main event, though. If there's one match that you should go out of your way to see from this show, it is absolutely the tag team title match between Randy Orton, Edge, and D-Generation X. Great matchup. Everything else in the show is pretty ho-hum. I enjoy the Intercontinental Championship match, a very good way to kick off the show. Tag Team Turmoil match was decent. Dystra and Flair, okay matchup. Happy that Dystra went over. Mickie James and Victoria, pretty good matchup. And the filler matchup that I forgot to mention before, Masters and Carlito, was fine for what it was. So on the whole, I thought this was one of, if not the best New Year's Revolution, to be quite honest with you. And I know that's a little weird in saying that because there was no Elimination Chamber match on this show. They only had it in 05 and 06, not in the 07 installment. So, I mean, it may sound a little weird to say that. But on the whole, though, I thought this was a better show than past year's New Year's Revolutions because I enjoyed the 06 one. I enjoyed 05. But at least the main event, despite what my thoughts on the finish were, at least it had a story going into what people cared about it. A lot of people cared about DX versus Rated RKO. Great matchup, a lot of entertaining action, went almost 25 minutes. And everything else in the show pretty much filled out the card pretty well as well. Like I said before, IC title match was very, very good, and everything else was decent to good as well. That being said, folks, this is the final WrestleRant video of 2014. I thank you for your support. Going into 2015, I'll be reviewing a handful of Royal Rumble pay-per-views, I think starting with 96, 99, maybe 2000, a whole bunch after that for the entire month of January. So stay tuned for that. Extremely excited to start reviewing those events. In the meantime, in between time, you can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant, Facebook, Ramses and Matthews. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch you guys in 2015. Have a very happy new year, and I'll catch you guys then.